The same eye makeup routine, the same brands, sometimes the same pencil that has lived in the bottom of the makeup bag for 20 years. At 35, that routine flattered. At 55, it adds years, and not one product in the bag has changed. So why does a routine that worked for 2 decades start working against the face wearing it? Because nearly every rule it follows was written for a different eye. These are the 10 biggest makeup mistakes on mature eyes, counted down to the one that decides everything, with the fix beside each. None of this is a verdict on anyone's face. Every mistake in this countdown was correct advice once, taught at department store beauty counters, printed across magazine spreads, and demonstrated in tutorials filmed on 25-year-old lids. The advice held still while the canvas underneath it changed. Eyelid skin is the thinnest skin on the body, roughly 0.5 millimeter, and past 50 it is thinner still, drier, more textured, and folding along new lines, so techniques designed for taut young skin behave differently there. And the difference is observable by lunchtime. The list runs from the fastest mechanical fixes to the single placement principle that decides whether an eye reads lifted or tired. Every entry ahead eventually answers to that principle. Number 10, never curling the lashes. The eyelash curler is the most abandoned tool on the bathroom vanity. It looks faintly surgical, it pinches when rushed, and every mascara tube on the drugstore shelf already promises lift. So the curler stays in the drawer, sometimes for decades. For most of those decades, skipping it cost nothing. Lashes are keratin, the same protein as the hair on the head, and they age on the same schedule. After menopause, the follicles slow, so lashes grow in shorter, finer, and noticeably straighter than they did at 35. A straight lash on a mature eye does not sweep up and out of the way. It points down and slightly forward, sitting in front of the iris like a lowered awning. And an awning does 2 things at once. It blocks light from reaching the eye, and it lays a thin shadow across it. Cameras record that shadow without mercy, which is why the eyes in photographs keep reading smaller and more tired than they ever feel from the inside. The cost compounds through the day because mascara worn on straight lashes touches the hooded skin above with every blink, and by evening, the upper lid carries a row of small, gray dots, a print left by lashes that were never lifted out of the path. The fix costs 10 seconds an eye. Curl first, always before mascara and never after, since coated lashes turn brittle and can snap in the clamp. Set the curler at the base of the lashes, close it with a gentle pulse, then walk it out to the midpoint and pulse again, which builds a curve rather than a sharp crimp. Makeup artists who work on mature faces describe the curler as the least expensive lift in the entire kit, and daily wear supports them, because a curled lash line holds its arc and its open sight line from the first coffee of the morning to the evening news. A lifted top line changes the balance of the whole eye. It also exposes how quiet things are below it, and the instinct to correct that by loading the lower lashes with mascara is not a correction at all. It is number 9. Number 9. Heavy, clumping mascara on the lower lashes. The fully fringed eye was built for magazine close-ups, wide young eyes defined top and bottom under studio light. Volumizing mascaras chase that look with load-bearing formulas, thick with carnauba wax, beeswax, and film formers that bulk each lash the way plaster bulks a wall. On the long upper lashes of a 25-year-old, that load reads as drama. On the short, sparse lower lashes of a mature eye, the same wax bridges 3 or 4 fine hairs into a single heavy spike, and the spikes hang millimeters above the most fragile skin on the face. Then the chemistry takes over? The under eye is where richness collects. Night cream, eye cream, the emollients and concealer, plus the skin's own oils. And oil is a solvent for the waxes and pigments in a classic mascara. Within an hour of application, the sharp lower fringe begins to soften. By midday, the pigment has traveled, settling into the fine lines under the eye and tracing each one in gray, and every smile presses the coated lashes against the skin like a stamp. The result is darkness deposited exactly where the concealer was meant to erase it. Beauty editors over 40 have been quietly dropping lower lash mascara for years, and the replacement is specific. Either leave the lower lashes bare and let the curled upper line carry the eye, or switch to a tubing mascara, a formula that wraps each lash in a flexible polymer sleeve instead of painting it with wax. The tubes cannot dissolve in oil, which is why they do not smudge, and they slide off with warm water at night without any tugging at the skin. In brown rather than black, on a wand wiped nearly dry, lower lashes stay defined at 4 in the afternoon instead of dissolved by noon. Clearing the darkness from under the eye settles half of an old imbalance. The other half sits above, because an eye is framed from the top by the brow, and for many women that frame was tweezed down to a thread in the 90s and never fully grew back. That thread is number 8. Number 8, over-thin, flat brows. The pencil-thin brow was the price of admission to the 90s and the early 2000s. Beauty counters taught it, magazines printed it, and a generation of women tweezed to match. The instruction assumed the hair would always come back. It often does not. A follicle plucked repeatedly for years can go dormant and stop producing, and age works on the survivors, since brow hairs thin, slow, and lose pigment on roughly the same schedule as the hair on the head. What remains is a sparse, flat line, where the face's strongest architectural feature used to stand. The brow is the frame the eye is read through. It draws the upward line at exactly the point where the outer eye begins to descend, and when the tail of the brow fades or was plucked away, that counterweight disappears. Nothing else on the face lifts the eye area the way an intact brow tail does, which is why makeup artists rebuild the brow before they touch a single eyeshadow. The common repair makes things worse. One hard pencil line, drawn dark and flat, reads as drawn from across a dinner table, and cheaper pencil pigments oxidize as the day goes on, drifting orange or ashy by evening depending on undertone. Rebuild in layers instead. Fill the sparse body with feathered hair strokes from a fine-tip pencil or a brow powder, one shade lighter than instinct suggests, because a soft brow reads fuller than a dark one. Set the tail on a gentle upward line toward the temple, a touch higher than where the last real hairs sit, and never let it curve down toward the ear. Then brush everything up and out with a tinted fiber gel, which wraps each remaining hair in pigment and cellulose fibers, adding visible bulk that no pencil can fake. The frame returns in about 90 seconds at the mirror, but a frame is only the border. Inside it sits the lid itself. The surface, every shadow, liner, and shimmer must live on for 12 hours, and on a mature lid nothing survives those 12 hours without preparation, which is why the most skipped step in the routine is number 7. Number 7, skipping eye primer. Primer is the easiest product to leave on the shelf. It is invisible when it works. The shadow packaging already promises all-day wear, and a woman who never needed primer at 35 has no reason to believe she needs it at 55. The lid she is working on, though, is not the lid she learned on. Two things changed underneath. Collagen and elastin production fall sharply after menopause, and the American Academy of Dermatology puts the collagen loss of the first 5 years alone at about 30%, which is why the lid folds more deeply and in more places than it once did. At the same time, the skin barrier thins and water escapes through it faster, the process dermatologists call transepidermal water loss, and the sensible response, richer eye creams, leaves a film of emollients sitting on the lid. Powder shadow, which is largely talc and pigment held together by oily binders, has nothing to grip on that film. The surface oils dissolve the binders, and blinking and gravity do the rest. The wear pattern is unmistakable. Color that looked even at 8 in the morning starts creeping by 10. By midday, the pigment has migrated into the deepest fold and gathered there as one dark line, drawn precisely along the crease. The one place depth was never wanted. By 4 in the afternoon, the center of the lid is bare while the fold holds everything, the morning's work in reverse. An eye primer interrupts that mechanically. Dimethicone, the silicone that gives primer its slip, settles into fine lines and levels them, so pigment cannot pool, while silica, a mineral powder, drinks up the oil that would otherwise carry pigment downhill. And the finished surface is uniform and faintly grippy, the exact texture powder wants. The application is a rice grain per eye, pressed on with a fingertip rather than rubbed, then given 30 seconds to set before any shadow touches it. On very dry lids, a long-wear cream shadow in a quiet neutral does the same anchoring with one product. Primer is the least glamorous purchase in the makeup aisle and the most structural, the difference between shadow at 8 in the morning and the same shadow at 8 at night. Aging Queens exists for exactly this kind of breakdown, the mechanism behind why a trusted product stops behaving on mature skin. If knowing what dimethicone or a film former is actually doing on the lid makes the makeup bag easier to shop for, subscribe. More breakdowns of specific brands and formulas are coming, and the goal stays the same. Fewer products bought that work against the face wearing them. Because primer has one limitation worth respecting. It holds whatever it is given faithfully until midnight. Hand it the wrong finish and it preserves the mistake all day, and the wrong finish is exactly where this countdown goes next. Number 6. Frosted finishes. Frost promises light. The gleaming silver lid, the icy champagne, the metallic taupe that dominated every palette of the 2000s, all of it sold at the counter as brightening, and brightening sounds like exactly what a tired eye needs. The promise is a particle question. The shine in any shadow comes from mica, thin mineral plates coated in titanium dioxide or iron oxides, and the size of the plate decides the finish. Finely milled plates reflect a soft, diffused sheen. Frost formulas use the largest plates at the highest concentration, and a large coated plate behaves like a tiny mirror. Mirrors do not create the surface they sit on. They report it. Laid across a smooth 20-year-old lid, thousands of aligned mirrors red as one clean gleam. Laid across a textured lid, each plate settles at its own angle and throws light in a different direction. And the eye viewing that scatter registers one word: crinkle. Real wear sharpens the verdict. Under the overhead lighting of an office or in the rearview mirror of a car at midday, every fold catches its own individual highlight. The frost did not create a single one of those lines, but it announces all of them, and it keeps announcing as the day goes on, because large particles migrate with oil and settle downward. So by evening, the sparkle has concentrated in the deepest creases, and the brightest points on the lid are also the lowest. Scroll the review section of any frosted palette, and the pattern repeats, with reviewers over 40 describing the same shadow as beautiful in the pan and unwearable on the lid. The verdict lands on the formula, not the lid wearing it. The fix is a finish swap. Satin shadows use the same mica milled fine and loaded light, which is why they glow without glittering, and a matte with a whisper of pearl gives dimension with no mirror effect at all. Radiance can also come from beneath, from a hydrated, primed lid, rather than from particle size stacked on top. The palette section to walk past is the one that flashes hardest under the store lighting. Retiring frost settles what the shimmer is made of. It does not settle where shimmer goes, and placement is a separate mistake with its own damage. Number 5. Shimmer swept edge to edge across a crepey lid. Even a well-chosen shimmer can be applied by a rule from another decade. The one-wash technique, a single luminous shade swept from lash line to brow bone in 4 seconds, was built for a lid with no texture to magnify, and it survives in every quick routine tutorial because it is fast. Crepiness changes the terms. When collagen and elastin thin out, lid skin takes on the surface of pressed tissue paper, fine ridges everywhere, and the lid is also the most mobile skin on the face, folding shut and open more than 10,000 times a day. Sweep reflective particles across all of it, and two mechanisms run at once. The particles highlight every ridge they touch, and the constant folding presses them into the fold line, where they collect and crease. Higher up is no safer, since the brow bone on a mature face sits on skin that has begun its slow descent, and highlighting a descending plane pushes it visually forward, which brings the hood along with it. The record of one day makes the case. A squint into morning sunlight flashes the crease. A phone photograph taken with flash at lunch turns the whole lid metallic and lined. By late afternoon, the wash has broken into patches, bright where particles pooled, bare where friction wore them away. The fix is rationing, not banning. Light belongs where mature skin stays smoothest, and there are exactly two such places: the center of the lid over primer and the inner corner beside the tear duct. A fine-milled satin pressed onto those 2 points with a fingertip, never swept with a brush, lies flat and stays flat because pressing lays particles down while sweeping stands them on edge. The brow bone takes a matte shade in skin tone, nothing more. The eye still catches light. It simply catches it on purpose. 2 entries in a row have now ended at the same conclusion. That placement decides everything, and the pattern holds from here to the top of the list. The remaining mistakes are all about where darkness goes, and the first of them is about the direction a brush travels. Number 4. Dragging shadow downward at the outer corner. The windshield wiper blend is the most taught motion in eye makeup, back and forth through the crease, following the natural line of the eye out toward its edge. Tutorials teach it on young eyes, where the outer corner tilts upward, so following the natural line meant sweeping up. Past 50, the same faithful motion travels a different road. The geometry shifted underneath it. Skin at the temple and outer brow loses its support. The outer corner of the eye settles a few degrees lower than it once sat, and a brush that follows the eye's line now moves downhill. Pigment laid on a downhill line works like an arrow. A viewer's gaze follows the darkest path on a face, and when the darkest path points toward the jaw, the whole eye appears to be sliding after it. There is a mechanical cost as well because every downward stroke drags thin lid skin along with it, and dermatologists have warned for years that skin low on elastin does not spring back from repeated tugging the way young skin does. The consequence reads from across a room. The outer third of the eye carries a painted droop that bone structure never ordered, and it deepens on schedule, since the day's oils carry the dragged pigment further along the same line. So the 4 o'clock face falls further than the 8 o'clock face did. Reverse the vector. Makeup artists who specialize in mature faces angle every stroke toward the tail of the brow and treat the temple as true north, blending up and out as if lifting the color off the face. Depth at the outer corner gets anchored slightly higher than instinct suggests, at the crease or just above it, and the color stops before it can hook downward past the corner. Same palette, same brush, opposite direction, and the eye follows the new arrow upward. Direction governs the shadow above the eye. Below the eye waits an older habit, one pencil line that shrinks the eye faster than any shadow can, and it has been riding in makeup bags since the kohl-rimmed red carpets of the early 2000s. Number 3. Dark liner on the lower waterline. The fully rimmed eye was the signature of 2000s drama. Black kohl pressed along the wet inner ledge of the lower lid, and it was designed for eyes large enough to give up territory. Rimming any eye makes it read smaller. That is the entire mechanism of the look, a closed, dark border trading size for intensity, and a wide young eye could afford the trade. A mature eye is already paying elsewhere. Lash density below has thinned. The visible aperture reads slightly smaller than it once did, and a dark rim on the lower waterline does 3 unhelpful jobs at once. It shrinks the visible white of the eye. It replaces the softness of lower lashes with a hard line, and it mirrors whatever natural shadow already sits beneath the eye. doubling the read of dark circles. Then there is the surface itself. The waterline is not skin, it is mucosa, wet, warm, and continuously bathed by tears and by the oils of the meibomian glands along the lash line. And no liner formula survives that environment for long because the eye's own moisture is built to flush foreign material out. Within an hour, the crisp rim is a soft smudge. By midday, the smudge has migrated into the lower lash line and settled as a gray half-moon directly on top of the circles the concealer was hired to cover, and the eye photographs smaller in every picture taken after mid-morning. Eye doctors add a health note to the cosmetic one, since pencil worn on the waterline can clog those same oil glands, a known contributor to dry, irritated eyes. The fix moves the light in and the dark out. A nude or soft peach pencil on the lower waterline does the reverse of black, extending the perceived white of the eye and canceling redness, and the change in a mirror is immediate. Definition below, when it is wanted, comes from a soft brown shadow smudged under the outer third of the lower lashes, on skin rather than mucosa, where it can actually stay put. But the lower rim rarely travels alone. It usually arrives as the bottom half of a complete circle, and the complete circle has a countdown position of its own. Number 2. Number 2. Harsh black liner ringing the whole eye. The full black ring is the beauty counter's shorthand for evening. It was built for editorial photography, oversized young eyes, and studio lighting engineered to erase shadows. 3 conditions that do not exist at a restaurant table. Black is the heaviest visual weight in the kit, and a continuous ring of it is a closed boundary. Closed boundaries make whatever sits inside them look smaller. On a mature eye already losing visible lid space to hooding, the ring spends exactly the resource the eye can least afford, and it costs color as well, since a band of pure carbon black absorbs the light around it and leaves the neighboring skin reading grayer by contrast. The formulas split the failure 2 ways, and the wear timeline exposes both. Long-wear liquid and gel liners get their endurance from denatured alcohol, which flashes off in seconds so the line sets instantly, and from acrylate film formers, which cure into a thin plastic ribbon. A rigid ribbon laid over skin that flexes with every blink and every smile does what rigid materials do under flexing. It cracks, and by the end of the day the corners have flaked. Traditional kohl pencils fail in the opposite direction, since their wax and oil base stays soft by design, and soft means mobile, migrating into the fine lines below the eye by mid-afternoon. One formula shatters, the other spreads, and either way the ring is gone by dinner, while the smallness it created remains in every photograph. Break the ring and keep the definition. Line the upper lash line only in soft brown or deep charcoal rather than carbon black, keeping the line thin at the inner corner and letting it thicken slightly as it moves outward, with the tail nudged up at the end. For density without width, press the pencil into the upper waterline beneath the lashes, the tightlining technique makeup artists use to thicken the fringe invisibly. The lower eye stays open, carrying at most the soft shadow smudge from the last entry. Definition on a mature eye comes from the top line and the lashes, never from enclosure, and even a perfect top line answers to a higher authority. One placement decision outranks every liner, lash, and brow choice on this list, because when it goes wrong, it pulls the entire eye down with it. Number 1. Number 1. Dark shadow placed where it drags the whole eye down. Every palette ships with the same instruction, printed on the insert or implied by the shade names: light on the lid, dark in the crease. The rule was written for a young eye whose crease sits high, stays visible when the eye is open, and folds along one clean line. On that eye, dark in the crease carves dimension exactly where dimension belongs. The mature eye moved, and the instruction did not follow. The crease slides lower with age, and on many eyes the upper lid folds over it entirely, the hooding that makes lid space disappear. Follow the palette rule now, and the darkest pigment lands along a line that is already descending, and dark does on a face what it has done in every painting since the Renaissance. It recedes, It drops. It pulls the gaze downward. Worse, a hooded fold swallows the work, so the carefully placed crease shade vanishes the moment the eye opens, then transfers upward onto the hood with every blink, smearing depth across the one surface that needed light. The consequence is the one this entire countdown has been walking toward. In conversation, with the eyes open and moving, all anyone sees is a darkened, heavier lid. And in photographs, the eyes read closed down and tired, regardless of how carefully the liner, lashes, and brows around them were done. The other 9 mistakes each cost something. This one decides the verdict on the whole face. The fix is a remap, and it is done with the eyes open. Look straight into the mirror, note where the fold actually shows, then place the transition shade slightly above that line, on the brow bone side, so the depth stays visible when the eye is open. Makeup artists who specialize in faces over 50 call this lifting the crease, drawing the fold where it used to be rather than where it fell. The darkest shade stays confined to the outer third, angled up toward the tail of the brow. The mobile lid itself stays in a light matte so it advances instead of receding, and the deepest point of the whole design sits higher and further out than any palette insert ever suggested. A few millimeters of relocation, and the same 5 shadows that drag the eye down now hold it up. Set the 10 mistakes side by side, and they stop being 10 separate errors. Every failure on this list traces back to weight, rigidity, oversized particles, or downward placement, and every fix moves in the same 4 directions: softer color, flexible formulas, finer texture, and placement that follows the lift of the eye rather than its descent. It is the pattern this channel keeps finding across the mature face, the same reason hydrating, flexible sheer formulas outperform heavy pigment and aggressive mattifiers on skin past 50. The face kept changing year by year, exactly as faces do. The instructions on the palette insert never changed at all, and every mistake in this countdown lives in the gap between those 2 facts. The comments are open for the counter advice that taught these habits in the first place, and for which fix goes to work tomorrow morning. And if this breakdown earned its 20 minutes, consider subscribing to Aging Queens. Every episode takes one product or one habit apart the same way, naming what a formula actually does to skin over 50, so the next purchase is an informed one.